dump it right on the floor just like we're doing here, and then you come back with a notched squeegee. The one we're using has 1/8 inch notches on it, and that seems to work just perfect for this application. You want to get it on the floor as evenly as possible with that squeegee, and as you can see, it'll move the excess around, and because of the notches, it'll give just very consistent coverage. If you do not use a notched squeegee, you're going to get a lot of color variation, because you're going to end up with a different epoxy coverage, and believe me, it does not look good. So use the squeegee, and you're gonna get some really good results. Then, as you can see, we're going right up to the wall, and we're kind of making a mess, but it's all gonna get trimmed out, so we're not worried about it. Then after you put the epoxy down with the squeegee, you have to back roll. This is gonna get you the even coverage that you're looking for. As you can see, we're also bumping against the back wall, and again, we're not worried because that's gonna get wood, plywood over all that, so that's all gonna get covered up. And instead, what we're doing with that back wall, if you can tell, every time we make a pass, we touch it, and that serves as a guide so that we don't miss any spots. It tells us exactly where we're at, and again, you're looking for consistency. You don't want to miss any spots, because then you're going to be able to see it. Here you can see why we use the painter's tape. We go right over the tape, and when we are finished, we just pull the tape up, and it'll give us a perfectly straight finished edge. So this is what it looks like after the first coat. We have to give it enough time to cure, usually overnight, and before we can continue on to apply the second coat. Here you can see this is the second day. We're back, and what you're going to find is there's going to be a lot of air bubbles on the surface when you come back on the second day. That's normal. What happens is the epoxy goes into the pores in the concrete and evacuates the air out of the pores, but because the epoxy's thick, it doesn't let the air escape, and they show up as bubbles on the surface. So the way to deal with those bubbles is to go over the entire surface with a buffing machine using an 80 or 100 sanding screen. I think we used a 60 grit, and that's going to knock down all those bubbles, and then you just sweep up the dust that it's going to create, and you'll be ready to apply the second coat. You can see all those white spots, they were bubbles, so you can see there was a lot of them. So anyway, one way to get around that all the bubbles is to prime the concrete before the epoxy with like a polyurethane 250, but I prefer just to put the epoxy down and just deal with the bubbles, as I prefer to put 2 coats of epoxy 400 just to give me a real nice color coverage. The forecast for today called for 20 to 30 mile an hour winds, so we had to build a temporary door because the overhead doors have not been installed yet. This is going to keep wind and mainly dust from blowing into the shop, but those are some of the things that you have to overcome, and when you do projects like this one. So this is what it looks like after the second coat has been applied. As you can see, it's the color is very uniform.